6 ballistic missiles came in over Kiev on the night of July 11th, 2026. Ukraine's air defense units tracked all 6. They engaged all 6. And every single one of them broke through anyway. Alongside those ballistic missiles, Russia launched 6 tactical cruise missiles and 121 attack drones, saturating the capital's airspace in a single coordinated assault. Ukrainian defenders managed to shoot down 111 of those drones and 2 of the cruise missiles, an interception rate that sounds impressive until you realize the 6 weapons that actually mattered most. The ballistic missiles, capable of carrying the heaviest warheads and striking with almost no warning, got through every single time. Today, we're breaking down exactly what happened over Kiev that night. Why this specific attack matters even more than the raw numbers suggest, why Ukraine's own president says his defenders are being forced to ration air defense missiles they use to fire freely, and how this single night fits into what's already being described as one of the deadliest months of the entire war for Ukraine's capital. Stay to the end, because the real story here isn't just about one bad night. It's about a defense system that's visibly running out of ammunition in real time in front of the entire world. Let's start with the raw mechanics of the attack itself, because the specific weapons mix tells you a lot about how Russia is adapting its tactics. According to the Ukrainian Air Force, Russia launched 6 Iskander-M or S-400 ballistic missiles from the Bryansk region, positioned in western Russia near the Ukrainian border, giving those missiles a relatively short flight time before impact. Alongside those, Russia fired 6 tactical cruise missiles and 121 attack drones, a mixed strike package specifically designed to overwhelm air defense operators by forcing them to track and prioritize dramatically different threat types simultaneously. Slower-moving attack drones, faster cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles that travel at a completely different speed and trajectory, all arriving in the same airspace within the same window. Ukrainian defense units managed to shoot down 111 of the 121 drones and 2 of the 6 cruise missiles. But every single one of the 6 ballistic missiles broke through Kiev's defenses and struck their targets. That 0% intercept rate on the ballistic missiles, specifically, is the detail that should worry you far more than the headline drone count. Because ballistic missiles are generally the hardest, most expensive, and most resource-intensive threats to intercept. And they're also usually the ones capable of causing the most catastrophic single-strike damage. President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the attack directly, and his own choice of words is worth paying close attention to. He said civilian infrastructure was hit even before the air raid alert had even been issued to residents, meaning the first missiles were already striking before people had the chance to seek shelter. He confirmed that Ukrainian defenders downed most of the incoming targets, but specifically acknowledged that they did not stop the ballistic ones. He then made a direct public appeal to Ukraine's allies, urging them to quickly deliver the air defense packages that had already been agreed to just days earlier at the NATO summit. That's a striking sequence of events. A sitting wartime president, on the night of an attack, publicly confirming that his country's air defense system failed against an entire category of incoming weapon, and using that specific failure to press allies for faster delivery of already promised military aid. That's not typical wartime messaging discipline. That's a government under real visible strain, choosing transparency about a defensive shortfall because the alternative, staying quiet and hoping nobody notices the pattern, apparently wasn't seen as viable anymore. And here's the detail that turns this from a single bad night into a much bigger structural story. According to domestic Ukrainian media reporting, air defense teams have been forced to switch sophisticated Patriot missile batteries into manual operational mode, specifically to carefully conserve dwindling interceptor stocks. Think about what that actually means in practice. The Patriot system is designed to operate with a high degree of automation, rapidly detecting, tracking, and engaging incoming threats using its own radar and targeting computer with minimal need for constant human micromanagement. Switching a system like that into manual mode isn't a minor technical adjustment. It's a deliberate choice to slow down and tightly control exactly when and how each interceptor missile gets fired, because every single shot now has to be weighed against a shrinking, difficult-to-replace inventory. That's the kind of operational decision militaries make when they're genuinely worried about running out of a critical resource before resupply arrives, not when they're operating from a position of comfortable abundance. Let's talk about what actually got hit inside Kiev that night, because the damage wasn't confined to a single district or a single type of target. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko confirmed via social media that a transformer substation caught fire in the Darnitsky district, while a 3-story office building burned in the Solomyansky district. According to Ukrainska Pravda, a railway locomotive was heavily damaged by the primary blast wave from one of the strikes, and nearby commercial warehouses along with a pharmacy suffered significant structural failure. Beyond the city limits, emergency responders had to deploy specialized fire trains specifically to contain a massive blaze, roughly 4,000 square meters in size, at a regional infrastructure facility. That's an enormous fire, large enough to require dedicated rail-based firefighting equipment rather than standard ground crews alone. In terms of human costs specifically within Kiev, Klitschko confirmed the wounded included an 11-year-old boy, with 4 of the injured requiring emergency hospitalization. Nationwide, this same overnight assault killed at least 2 people and wounded 19 more, with a missile strike on Odessa killing 2 people and wounding 1, and a separate drone attack on a residential building in Kharkiv, injuring 7 more people. Beyond the immediate casualties, the Ukrainian Air Force confirmed that Russia's broader nationwide missile and drone campaign that same night successfully struck at least 11 separate infrastructure sites across the country, meaning Kiev, while clearly a primary target, was far from the only place absorbing damage that night. Now, let's put some honest context around the phrase deadliest night, because it's important to get this right rather than simply reaching for the most dramatic possible framing. In terms of raw fatality count on this specific night, July 11th was not actually the deadliest single night Kiev has experienced this year, or even this specific month. Earlier in July, on the night of July the 2nd, a Russian attack killed 31 people in Kiev and injured more than 100 others, marking the widest destruction the capital had seen in all of 2026 up to that point, and the deadliest single strike on the city since at least May. Then, just 4 days later, on the night of July the 6th, Russia struck Kiev again, killing at least 26 people and injuring dozens more in an attack that hit multiple residential buildings and forced the evacuation of more than 600 residents from a nearby town due to the risk of a secondary detonation. So when you place July 11th's 2 confirmed nationwide deaths next to July 2nd's 31 and July 6th's 26, this specific night clearly wasn't the deadliest single incident of the month by casualty count. What makes it significant instead is the sheer scale and composition of the attack itself. 121 drones, plus a dozen missiles in one coordinated wave, combined with that alarming 0% ballistic missile intercept rate, arriving as the latest entry in what regional data compiled by local authorities describes as more than 60 people killed across Kiev and its outlying metropolitan area since the very start of July alone. In other words, this wasn't the single worst night. It was one especially intense night inside what is, by the numbers, already one of the deadliest months the Ukrainian capital has experienced throughout the entire war. Let's zoom out and connect this specific attack to the broader pattern building across the first 2 weeks of July, because the frequency here is almost as alarming as any individual night's death toll. According to reporting, this July 11th assault followed what's been described as a sharp escalation in Russian aerial operations, targeting the capital since the start of the month. And it marked the 3rd time Kiev had been hit with a large-scale attack within a single week, following a similar wave just days earlier on July 7th. 3 major waves of attacks against a single city within roughly a week is an extraordinarily punishing operational tempo, both for the city's residents trying to survive each individual night, and for Ukraine's air defense crews who have to fully restock, recalibrate, and prepare their systems again and again with almost no recovery window between major assaults. That kind of sustained pressure is exactly the scenario that leads to decisions like switching Patriot batteries into manual conservation mode. You can't keep firing interceptors at full automated capacity, night after night after night, if the supply chain replenishing those interceptors can't keep pace with how quickly they're being expended. This is where the story connects directly to broader diplomatic developments happening at almost the exact same time. Just 1 day before this July 11th attack, reporting confirmed that Donald Trump had granted Ukraine licenses to begin domestically producing Patriot missile components, a major shift discussed at the NATO summit in Ankara earlier that same week. Zelensky's public appeal following the July 11th attack, urging allies to quickly deliver the air defense packages agreed to at that summit, takes on much sharper meaning when you realize the timing. Ukraine had just secured a significant new pathway toward expanding its own Patriot production capacity, and within 24 hours, its capital was absorbing an attack where every single incoming ballistic missile broke through existing defenses. That's not a coincidence in the sense of one causing the other, but it is a brutally clear illustration of exactly why that Patriot production agreement mattered so much in the first place, and why the gap between securing a production license and actually having enough interceptors in the field to stop every threat remains a dangerous, ongoing vulnerability. Let's talk about why ballistic missiles specifically represent such a disproportionate threat compared to drones, because understanding that technical distinction explains why a 0% intercept rate on just 6 missiles is more alarming than a 92% intercept rate on 121 drones might initially suggest. Attack drones, even in large swarms like the 121 launched that night, generally travel at relatively slow speeds and follow predictable flight paths, making them, while still dangerous and capable of causing real damage, comparatively easier for air defense systems to detect, track, and intercept over an extended engagement window. Ballistic missiles operate completely differently. They travel at extremely high speeds, often along trajectories that give defenders only a matter of seconds to detect, calculate an intercept solution, and fire before impact. Systems like the Patriot are specifically designed and prioritized for exactly this kind of high-speed, high-value target, precisely because so few other systems in Ukraine's arsenal are capable of reliably stopping them at all. When Ukraine's Patriot batteries are being forced into manual, interceptor-conserving operation due to dwindling stockpiles, that's not a minor operational inconvenience. It's a direct threat to the one category of defense specifically built to stop the exact category of weapon that just achieved a perfect, unblocked breach rate over Ukraine's capital. Let's also talk about the fuel and infrastructure angle, because that massive 4,000 square meter blaze at a regional infrastructure facility fits into a much larger pattern that's been unfolding throughout this same period of the war. Reporting from the same week noted that Ukraine has been aggressively targeting Russian oil infrastructure and fuel supply lines, feeding occupied Crimea and Russia's own domestic consumers, part of a broader campaign to squeeze Russia's warfighting capacity from the fuel and logistics side. Russia's own strikes on Ukrainian infrastructure, including whatever regional facility suffered that massive fire following the July 11th attack, can be read as part of the same broader logic playing out in reverse, an attempt to degrade Ukraine's own energy and logistics capacity in response. Both sides, in other words, have increasingly folded infrastructure and energy targets directly into their broader military campaigns, treating fuel depots, transformer substations, and logistics hubs as legitimate, high-value targets right alongside more traditional military and residential objectives. That's part of why a single night's damage report from Kiev now routinely includes burning transformer substations and damaged railway locomotives alongside residential casualty figures, a reflection of just how thoroughly this war has expanded to target the entire infrastructure backbone that keeps a modern city and a modern war effort actually functioning. There's a human dimension here that's easy to lose beneath the missile counts and interception percentages, and it deserves to be named directly. An 11-year-old boy was among the wounded in Kiev that night. 4 people required emergency hospitalization. A woman and a man were killed in Odessa. 7 more people were injured in Kharkiv when a drone struck a residential building. These aren't abstract statistics measuring air defense performance. They're specific people whose lives were directly and violently disrupted during a single overnight assault, layered on top of the more than 60 deaths already recorded across Kyiv and its surrounding region since the start of the same month. Every night like this, one adds to a cumulative toll that residents of Kyiv have now been absorbing, night after night, for years, with July 2026 already standing out as one of the most brutal stretches yet. So what should you actually watch for going forward? First, whether the Patriot air defense packages agreed to at the NATO summit, along with the newly granted domestic production licenses, actually translate into a meaningful increase in Ukraine's available interceptor stockpile within a time frame that matters, or whether the gap between diplomatic agreement and battlefield delivery continues to leave Kyiv exposed to the kind of unblocked ballistic missile strikes seen on July 11th. Second, whether Russia continues this specific pattern of large-scale, multi-weapon type saturation attacks against Kyiv on a roughly weekly tempo, or whether the intensity eases as August approaches. And third, whether Ukraine's broader campaign against Russian fuel and infrastructure targets, discussed in detail elsewhere in recent coverage, begins to visibly affect Russia's own capacity to sustain this pace of missile and drone production and launches, or whether both sides simply continue trading, escalating infrastructure strikes against each other with no clear sign of either side's capacity meaningfully degrading in the near term. Let's put the sheer scale of these numbers into a longer historical trend, because it helps explain why Ukrainian air defense is under this much strain in the first place. According to Ukrainian officials, Russian forces launched more than 7,000 drones into Ukraine during 2024 alone, at least twice as many as the total launched in 2023. That escalation didn't level off. Earlier this same year, on the night of May 13th into May 14th, 2026, Russia conducted what Ukrainian President Zelensky described at the time as the largest aerial attack of the entire war, launching 167 drones and 56 missiles in a single overnight assault with a heavy concentration aimed at Kiev's Darnitsky district specifically, killing 27 people, 24 of them in Kiev alone. Measured purely by drone volume, that May attack dwarfs the 121 drones launched on July 11th. But raw drone count isn't the only measure of how dangerous a given night actually is, and this is exactly why the July 11th attack drew so much attention, despite involving a comparatively smaller drone swarm. It's the combination of factors: a full breach on every single ballistic missile, the forced shift to manual Patriot operation, and the fact that this was already the third major strike on Kyiv within a single week, that made this specific night stand out as a warning sign, even without matching May's staggering drone total. In other words, the story here isn't really about which single night had the most drones or the highest body count. It's about a clear, sustained trend of escalating attack frequency and evolving Russian tactics that Ukraine's air defense infrastructure is increasingly struggling to keep pace with, month after month, regardless of which specific night happens, to set a new individual record. Before wrapping up, it's worth being clear about where every detail in this video comes from, given how many specific figures are involved. The weapons breakdown, the 6 ballistic missiles, 6 cruise missiles, and 121 drones, along with the exact interception numbers, comes directly from the Ukrainian Air Force's own statement, as reported by Al Jazeera, citing AFP and Reuters. Zelensky's direct quotes regarding the ballistic missile failures and his appeal to allies are drawn from his own public statement following the attack. The Patriot batteries being switched to manual operational mode is sourced to domestic Ukrainian media reporting, specifically flagged as an internal operational detail rather than an official government announcement, which is worth knowing given how sensitive that kind of information typically is for a military still actively defending against nightly attacks. The comparative casualty figures from the July 2nd and July 6th attacks earlier in the month come from Fox News, Time, and Kiev independent reporting respectively, all of which independently confirmed those death tolls through Ukrainian emergency services and government officials. Given how quickly this specific war's daily casualty and damage figures tend to shift and get revised, if you're watching this sometime after publication, it's worth checking for updated reporting on the exact cumulative toll for July. There's a deeper economic and industrial dimension to this story worth sitting with, because it explains why simply agreeing to send more Patriot interceptors isn't a problem that gets solved overnight. A single Patriot PSE-3 interceptor missile costs several $millions to produce, and American and Allied manufacturing capacity for these specific interceptors has been running well below the pace needed to meet global demand, a demand that includes not just Ukraine, but every other nation currently relying on Patriot systems for its own air defense. That production bottleneck is a big part of why Trump's decision to grant Ukraine licenses for domestic Patriot component production matters so much strategically, even though it won't produce results fast enough to have helped during the July 11th attack. Building out domestic or allied production capacity takes months to years to meaningfully scale, even under the most urgent wartime conditions. In the meantime, every night like July 11th, where 6 ballistic missiles go up against a system deliberately conserving its dwindling interceptor stock, represents the exact kind of dangerous gap that exists between a long-term industrial fix and the immediate, nightly reality facing Kiev's air defense crews right now. That gap is also why Zelensky's specific choice of words after this attack carries real diplomatic weight beyond just describing what happened. By publicly and specifically naming the ballistic missile failures, rather than simply reporting overall casualty figures, he's making a direct, targeted case to Western allies about exactly where the most urgent need lies, not just for more air defense in general, but specifically for the interceptors capable of stopping the one category of weapon Ukraine currently has almost no reliable way to counter once its Patriot stockpile runs thin. Whether that message translates into faster interceptor deliveries in the weeks following this attack, or whether Kiev continues absorbing unblocked ballistic missile strikes while the broader production and supply chain slowly catches up, is likely to become one of the clearest measures of how seriously Ukraine's allies are treating this specific vulnerability heading into the second half of 2026. Let's go back to where we started. 6 ballistic missiles, 6 cruise missiles, 121 attack drones. Ukrainian defenders stopped 111 of the drones and 2 of the cruise missiles, a genuinely impressive interception performance on paper. But every single ballistic missile got through, striking a city already reeling from more than 60 deaths since the start of the month, forcing Patriot crews to switch into careful, manual, interceptor-conserving mode in the middle of an active war, and prompting a public appeal from Ukraine's own president for allies to move faster on air defense deliveries that had only just been agreed to days earlier. This wasn't the single deadliest night Kiev has faced this year, but it may end up being remembered as one of the clearest, most visible signs yet that Ukraine's air defense system is being stretched right to its breaking point, in full view of the world, one intercepted drone and one unblocked ballistic missile at a time. Thank you for watching. If this breakdown helped you understand why this specific attack matters so much despite not being the single deadliest night of the war, make sure to like the video and drop a comment letting us know what stood out most. Whether it's the 0% ballistic intercept rate, the Patriot batteries switching to manual mode, or the more than 60 deaths already recorded in Kiev this month alone. Subscribe if you want to keep tracking how Ukraine's air defense situation develops as promised. Western aid makes its way to the front because, based on the pattern of the last 2 weeks, Kiev's skies are very likely to be tested again soon,